Hello and welcome to the table, Baldur's Gate, D&D, and Total War Warhammer friends, to both a special character showcase and also class build with the help of several unique mods from the Baldurs Gate 3 Mod Nexus workshop. We will be creating Taurox the Brass Bull from the Silence and the Fury DLC from Total War Warhammer, and arguably one of my favorite legendary lords, specifically from the Beastmen Warhorde faction. Now, for those who aren't familiar with the Beastmen or Taurox and the MINOTAURs, a quick lore overview of their backstory is that they are the children of Chaos. The Chaos gods, when they first entered the world of Warhammer Fantasy, it was through great rifts from the old ones when they were trying to create essentially kind of like a little webway or a transportation system between the different continents and lands too. It went awry. It actually converged with the realms of chaos. Now, for all of the Warhammer fans out there that are very deep into the lore, feel free to interject and also add things that I may have missed. But essentially, this is just going to be my brief overview of the history of the Beastmen and Taurox himself. But essentially, when Chaos came into the world of Warhammer Fantasy, all of these magics, the mutations of change, kind of really affected all the people of the world, specifically primitive men, and the beasts that were both wild and domesticated too. So essentially, these chaos magics coalesced together and kind of mutated both men and beasts together to create the first Beastmen. And these were very feral, savage creatures. They were essentially half human. The bodies were human, but their faces and other parts of their body, like their limbs, were more animalistic. They would have faces of various creatures like wolves, mostly domesticated animals that you would think docile, like goats, cows, bulls, as would Taurox himself. And essentially these were like the dominant species at the time too, before men really could start uniting together. And this would be for like hundreds of years, and it would only be until a man named Sigmar himself, basically part of the Barbarian tribe, united the tribes of men together, and with their unity and also his leadership, organized themselves to actually fight back against both the Beastmen, orcs, and also chaos spawn in general. Now, the Beastmen themselves were driven to the darkest edges of the forest, to pretty much the most unknown parts of the old world, and there they basically slept. Not really slept, but also bided their time for their revenge against humans. And essentially, that's kind of where their hatred and their anger towards all things civilized stemmed from, was the fact that they were the dominant species, but with men evolving over time, uniting, and also developing weapons to actually stand up against them, they essentially took whatever they could and decided to retreat for the time being, and would emerge once more powerful champions of theirs actually were born. And one of these powerful champions was Taurox himself. So specifically, Taurox was born as a Minotaur from my understanding, but as he was essentially proving himself and winning battles against other beastmen, other minotaurs, and really just grew into a warrior of his own, he actually became a chieftain of his own war herd and started rampaging across the old world. I don't remember exactly which section of the empire. It might have been the Central Empire, but essentially he took his war herd of minotaurs and started causing huge rampages, nigh unstoppable, and the Chaos Gods took note of this, and they actually sent one of their dark emissaries. It isn't really stated I would suggest looking at Inept General's video on Taurox's biography. This is just my overall summed up view of his life and adventures, but essentially this emissary of the Chaos Gods went up to Taurox, offered him and his warherd essentially endless carnage in the service of the Chaos Gods, and essentially he would be able to slaughter as much as he wanted, but at the behest of swearing his soul and his warherd solely to the Chaos Gods before he could actually really give his full proposition to Taurox. Taurox, being a very brash and brazen minotaur, kind of didn't really care about alliances or whatnot. As soon as he saw this entity, he basically picked it up, bit off its head, and was about to go back to his business of rampaging with his warherd, when all of a sudden he started spasming on the ground, kind of losing it, honestly. His entire warherd gathered around him. They were kind of freaked out that their own chieftain was losing it after killing one demon or one unknown entity. And essentially, after this incident, he stood still for a minute. Everyone thought that he was dead for a hot minute, and all of a sudden, he kind of rose from the grave and started rampaging on his very own warherd. His own minotaurs were trying to stop him. Nothing could really actually get him to submit, or no blows were actually really doing any damage to him, because after he rose up, it was said that he started kind of steaming and fuming from like both his snout and also from like open wounds on his body, and he essentially became nigh impervious to normal amounts of damage, both bludgeoning, slashing, and essentially that's basically where he got his name, the Brass Bull, from. After consuming this chaos entity, it kind of messed with both his soul and also his physical form, thus kind of enveloping him in this brass skin armor, but also I'm sure was very painful too. And if I remember correctly, he could exude heat. And again, to all the Warhammer fans who really know their lore and also are very deep into it, please feel free to correct me and also interject information, because, well, side note, I am a huge sucker for lore in the Warhammer fantasy universe. But essentially, Taurox starts rampaging, kills his entire warherd, but essentially doesn't stop there. He basically goes across the Empire, goes on a spectacular rampage, killing both Empire people, Beastmen, orcs, even other chaos cultists. He has no distinguish whatsoever between friend or foe. He just wants absolute blood and carnage and an endless rampage, which, by the way, it's a pretty cool mechanic in his campaign for Total War Warhammer 1, 2, and 3. But essentially, I'm not sure what exactly stopped him. I think Inept General said that he basically stopped out of pure exhaustion and actually fell into a river of blood at his very last carnage spot. And I believe the Chaos Gods were so pleased and also very impressed with his rampage, despite him killing their emissary, that they resurrected him and essentially made him an immortal champion. But that's the basic gist of his backstory. Taurox the Brass Bull. We'll be recreating him in Baldur's Gate 3 using various classes to kind of provide him that nigh endless rampage. And as a side note too, since this is a modded playthrough, this is all just for personal fun for myself. These mods are here for your own viewing pleasure, or if you would like to use them yourselves, I will leave a list of my mods that I use below in this build in the pinned comment. And also the main thing that I also want to showcase too is that this may be optimized, but really it is all about a unique character showcase, roleplay, and also something that stands out amongst other Baldur's Gate 3 vids. Not to say that this is to be better, but this is something that's different and something that I really enjoyed, and hopefully you might enjoy and give a shot as well. Now, I also want to give a bit of a shout out to Colonel Baldurs. He has several other Total War Warhammer character builds in Baldur's Gate 3. I got inspired by several of his builds like Morathi and also Alitha Nar. I really do enjoy them. I might be creating my own versions in the future with mods. That is not to say that they are better than his. I simply just want to give a shout out to him, and also I highly recommend giving his mods a go, but also if you want, or giving his builds a go, but also the option is there if you want to have mods or play with mods in your game. It's whatever your preference is. There is no specific right or wrong way to go about it. At the end of the day, it's all about having fun with your character, however you want to play it, pure vanilla, or if you want to go bombastic like myself with different character mods to really flesh out your character. With that being said, let's go through all levels and also showcasing to you what we have in store too. For the beginning part of the build, you'll want to be using the fantastical multiverse mod from the Baldur's Gate 3 mod Nexus page, and basically it just adds a whole bunch of different races for you to create your character from, and some pretty ridiculous ones too, like the MINOTAUR class that we will be using to create our Taurox the Brass Bull. Now, here's the thing too, don't worry too much about appearance. As far as I know, you can't really change it, and there's not really much of a difference either, honestly. But essentially, some of the race features that you can expect are having a horn attack that strikes and deals 4 to 9 piercing damage instead of bludgeoning damage for an unarmed strike. Goring Rush, which specifically you can have immediately after taking a dash action on your turn and moving at least 6 meters. You can make 1 melee attack with your horns. There's also Hammering Horns immediately after you hit a creature with a melee attack. As part of the attack action on your turn, use your horns, and basically this specifically doesn't do damage, but it pushes them away from you and could be used as a little follow-up attack to ram an enemy off the edge. Labyrinthine Recall, it's an interesting one. I'm not entirely sure what use this specifically has. If some of you who have played MINOTAUR with Fantastical Multiverse have actually found use of this, please do let me know in the comments below. But from the mod description, it says you always know which direction is north and have advantage on any wisdom survival check when it comes to navigating. The class for Taurox, it's a definite yes for Barbarian, gaining the rage feature of doing 2 extra melee damage with improvised weapons or regular weapons, and of course not being able to cast spells, and also gaining unarmored defense while not wearing armor. Add your constitution modifier to your armor class. Background, you can really choose anything here. I personally wanted to choose Outlander just because the description really fits Taurox pretty well for the most part, and also useful skills of athletics and survival, which are increased here with the skill proficiencies based on the ability point allocation. So you're going to put most of your abilities and also gaining a +2 as well in strength, adding it up to 17. Dexterity at a respectable 14, Constitution, the second highest ability score modifier at 16 with the help of a bonus +1. Intelligence and wisdom you're going to take points away from, and that just fits Taurox thematically, roleplay wise as well. Not really the brightest, and also doesn't really make the wisest decisions, especially with the story of biting off that Chaos Emissary's head. Charisma, you can leave it at 10 honestly, just because you'll want at least a little bit of plus or positives with intimidation when it comes to skill proficiencies. And the other skill proficiency you could have a plus in would be perception. Always nice to be able to actually spot things. At second level of Barbarian, we gain features of danger sense, having advantage on dexterity saving throws against traps, spells, and surfaces. To gain this, we can't be blinded or incapacitated, and also we gain reckless attack, which suits Taurox very well. Until your next turn, you have advantage on attack rolls, but enemies also have advantage against you, so that's going to be a catch-22. Do you want to really dish out more attacks and damage, or do you also want to potentially play it conservative? But really, you're playing Taurox the Brass Bull, the endless raging Minotaur, so you're probably going to want to be using reckless attack more often than not. At level 3, we get a chance to choose a subclass. For me personally, I would choose Berserker, as it fits Taurox very well, and like I said before, this is more of a roleplay thematic build. With actions, we get Frenzy, Rage it turns into a Frenzy, gain Frenzied Strike, and Enrage Throw. You can also make an improvised weapon attack as a bonus action for 10 turns. Note that Rage will end early if you don't attack an enemy or take damage each turn, and also you can't cast or concentrate any spells while raging, but hey, you are a barbarian, you're not going to be using any spells whatsoever on this, unlike some of my other builds. We also gain Frenzied Strike as a bonus action, make a melee attack, an extra melee attack, and also Enrage Throw, picking up an item or creature and throwing it at a target, and knocking it prone. But also, I do want to say some targets might be too big for you to throw, despite you being a Minotaur with this modded class build. Keep leveling up a few levels in the Berserker Barbarian. For the first feat, this might be a bit of a controversial take even for Taurox himself, but personally, I would choose Tough just because of the fact that you will want, well, this is the Warhammer nerd in me thinking ahead of this strategy. You want to have as much maximum hit points for Taurox to really fit that tank level, and also to really be the sole frontline damage dealer, and also being able to be a one-man army or one Minotaur army. So we are going to take this feat as early as possible, gaining a maximum of increase +2 to health every level we gain. That will stack up for the next several levels. At Barbarian level 5, we gain extra attack, making an additional free attack, and it being either a weapon or unarmed / our horns, and also an increase to movement speed. Both of these really play into Taurox's overall strategy of a nigh endless rampage. And yes, movement speed may just be a +3, but at the same time, it can make all the difference for you. We'll level up a few more levels. At level 6, we will get Mindless Rage, becoming all-consuming, repelling all outside influence, and while frenzied, we can't be charmed nor frightened, and Calm Emotions no longer ends our rage. So these three conditions, or these three anti-conditions, I should say, will really play into the fact that we don't have to worry whatsoever of any pesky spellcasters ending our or blood rage, and essentially we just have to continue having fun making a killing. Also, we gain an additional rage charge as well. Now, we could have Feral Instinct at level 7, but this is also where I'll make a controversial change too. At this level, we'll be choosing Rogue, and later down the line, you'll see why, specifically for a subclass, and, well, spoiler alert too, gaining the Fast Hands extra bonus action too. For skill proficiencies here, you can choose whatever you'd like. I personally would give some points into acrobat athletics for Taurox to really give him that for roleplay purposes, and to give him a bit of an edge on specific actions that require strength. Survival is also another good one too, and for the base skill points, you can give it to any of these really. Personally, I like, or actually, you know what, having athletics and also intimidation as a bonus too, just to really fit him as that menacing brass bull. For the base one, you can just leave it at sleight of hand. I think it would be kind of funny to have him gain a little bit of sneakiness as well. And like I said, this one, I know I said I wanted it to be more roleplay-esque, but also gaining that Fast Hands extra feat action, or extra action with Fast Hands, is something that I really can't pass up. At second level of Rogue, we gain Cunning Action of Hide. It's just really funny to think about Taurox being very stealthy, although Beastmen in Total War Warhammer are known for their ambushing tactics too. We also gain Cunning Action of Dash, covering more distance as a bonus action, and also Disengage. Retreating safely won't provoke opportunity attacks. You probably won't be retreating as much as Taurox unless you're really getting hounded and surrounded by enemies. Now this is where it really comes through. At level 3, we gain Fast Hands bonus action if we choose the Thief subclass, and also gaining resistance to any falling damage here. You're probably thinking that we should change back to Barbarian or even switch to Fighter at this point. That would be nice too. Although, gaining this feat here, we will be picking up a Dual Wielder, giving a +1 to our armor class while wielding melee weapons in each hand, and also the actual Dual Wielder class feature. You can use 2 weapon fighting even if the weapons you are wielding aren't light. This is very key here for 2 of our axes. You cannot dual wield heavy weapons, but in order to really match and roleplay as Taurox the Brass Bull, having 2 axes in each hand, that really fits his character and his vibe from his actual campaign. So this is the feat that we will pick at this level. At level 11, you could really go either way, gaining Uncanny Dodge and having the chance to only take half the usual damage, but also we could really go balls to the walls here and choose Fighter as well. Gaining a fighting style of 2 weapon fighting. When you make an attack with your offhand weapon, add your ability modifier to the damage of the attack. And also, it's very tempting to gain the Action Surge at this level too, gaining an extra action to use this turn. And yeah, that just adds more to Taurox's nigh endless rampage as well. Specifically for the gear too, I know Taurox technically does not wear any armor or clothes whatsoever, but this is all for the different status effects here. For the helmet, we will be using the Helldusk helmet for Infernal Sight. You see in magical and ordinary darkness up to a range of 12 meters and cannot be blinded. With magical durability, the wielder has a +2 bonus to saving throws against spells. Attackers also can't land critical hits against you. We also gain a fun action of immolating gaze. Sear and frighten target with nothing but you glorying at them. Now, technically, Taurox does not have spells, but also this kind of plays into his Brass Bull feature, and also the fact that, yeah, he is emitting steam from what I remember. And also, frightening your opponents is always a really fun roleplay experience. We also will be using the Cindermoth Cloak, a creature that damages you. The flame enameled armor is a really good thematic armor for him, as seldom caught unawares means we gain a +2 to initiative rolls, meaning that we can actually make first strikes in combat, and also just gaining the ability to strike first. That's always a good part with Taurox as the frontliner. Endurance by fire, we have resistance to fire damage and a +2 bonus to saving throws too. That just adds a little bit of roleplay flavor to him being a nigh indestructible Brass Bull. And yes, disadvantage on stealth checks, but hey, we are a literal giant Minotaur, so no need for that. We also gain a fire shield at this level. Scorching flames shed light in a 3 meter radius. You take only half damage to all cold damage and deal 2 to 16 fire damage to anyone who hits you with a melee attack, lasting 10 turns. This is basically a last minute or last stand kind of spell / action for us to have to really hold our ground, and also as like a real screw you to the enemies that are surrounding us, and kind of plays back into the Cindermoth Cloak punishment ability. We'll also gain Bone Spike Gloves. Attacks ignore resistance to slashing, piercing, and bludgeoning damage, meaning our attacks with axes will not be hindered by any resistances at all, and also being able to dish out the maximum amount. Briskwind Boots gives us critical swiftness. After scoring a critical hit or killing a hostile creature, movement speed is restored to maximum. I really like this personally as a little nod and homage to his rampage mechanic in his campaign, essentially rewarding you with winning battles and providing you with momentum to keep going. And yes, that this was more powerful and potent in Total War Warhammer 2. He's still very powerful in Warhammer 3, just not as much movement or momentum. As for specific jewelry, I like Wakeful Amulet. Can't be willingly put to sleep. That just means that we don't have to worry about spellcasters getting in the way with us. Searing Smite gives us even more damage with our weapons. Deal an extra 1 to 6 fire damage and set your target on fire, taking 1 to 6 fire damage every turn for 10 turns, and that is a long time in combat. Ring of Regeneration is also something that I personally find very useful and coming in clutch. Even though it says it only heals you 1 to 4 hit points, that can stack up per turn too. Plus also, it's a nice little counter to us generating heat on ourselves, and also it's a good way to offset the amount of fire damage done to ourselves too. With the Thermodynamo Axe, whenever you deal damage with this weapon, gaining 2 turns of heat. Now specifically with heat, 1d4 fire damage engulfed by a vengeful fire, take 1 to 4 fire damage each turn, but using heat convergence, we can use that to actually deal more fire damage to our enemies too. Essentially, it's saying like, hey, deal damage to yourself, but on the next turn, you get to deal additional fire damage to the enemy. And the Ring of Regeneration is a nice little foil and offset to that axe weapon. Now with the other axe weapon is the combination axe. Critical Virtuoso. When you score a critical hit, you can spend a bonus action to make, yes, an additional attack. So in total, you can have up to 2 to 3 extra attacks and bonus actions too. As it was shown earlier in the video, you can be using the whole bread and butter brutal leap, attack, extra attack, and also action surge if you wish to, and essentially moving around and going back and forth against all your enemies. But that's it for this specific character build showcase and also a modded playthrough. If you guys would love to see more Warhammer characters, I do have several more in store in the future. There's also several other unique character builds with mods that I want to include. And also, before we go, I'd like to invite all of you, if you are fans of Warhammer, D&D, Elder Scrolls, and of course Baldur's Gate, I'd love to have you join us on the next adventure, friends. So be sure to hit those like, subscribe, and bell icon notifications, and I'll save you a seat at the table for the next adventure. Appreciate you all, and may the dice be ever in your favor, my friends.
You